There's been a lot of talk about what the Mets should do at the trade deadline. Will they be buyers? Will they be sellers? We're going to talk to Jon Heyman, baseball columnist for the New York Post, who joins me now on the phone to talk about this with the Mets. Jon just wrote a column on the Mets not giving up on their playoff dream, but time is running out as the trade deadline looms. So, Jon, I got to ask you this. The Mets head into Sunday Night Baseball, 7 games out of the final wildcard spot in the NL. Is it realistic for fans to believe that this team can make the playoffs?
Well, it depends what you think realistic is. I think it's probably a 10 to 15% chance, so it's possible, certainly. They're going to have to hustle. They have not played well. Obviously, they're still under 500 as we're getting close to 100 games played here. So can it be done? Theoretically, yes. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not.
Not going to be easy for the Mets. How much will this next week coming up, factor into whether or not the Mets are buyers or sellers at the deadline? And where do you think they have to be? How close to 500 do you need to be to determine whether they're going to be buyers or sellers at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, this week is clearly the key. There's just 8 days to go now before the deadline. So, they're obviously going to have to play better. They've played 500 since the All-Star game. So that isn't great. I mean, they really need to be playing at least 600 baseball, probably more than that, to be a viable contender. So I would say they certainly have to win the majority of their games before the deadline to consider themselves either a buyer or a team that's going to hold. If they continue on this path, cannot be shocked if they're sellers. My issue with selling is really they don't have a ton of players that they are valuable in the trade market. The only one really who you would consider trading, if you're not in it, would be David Robertson, who's got excess value, meaning his contract is lower than his worth. Obviously, Verlander and Scherzer are still good pitchers. They may not be the same guys that are on the way to the Hall of Fame, but still good pitchers. I think there'd be some interest, but you'd have to pay their contracts way down to do it. So they're in a very, very difficult spot.
So you talk about them being in a difficult spot with potentially being sellers at the deadline. If they do play well this week before the trade deadline and they're buyers, what players do you think the Mets should target if that happens?
I think they're going to need bullpen help. I think that's the easiest solution. You're going to need Scherzer and Verlander to be themselves or close to themselves. I feel like Verlander is a little bit closer right now. Scherzer's had some great games, but when he does, he seems to have a bad one after that, as he did last night, giving up 4 home runs, including one to a guy who was hitting 160. So I do think the bullpen is probably worn out at this point and seems to be really in trouble. Robertson has been great. Raley has been good. The rest of them have been average or less. So I do think they're going to need some reinforcements in the pen. If they are buyers, they're going to have to beef up that pen because, I think their rotation has the ability to do it, and they're going to have to believe it because, they're not going to give up big prospects if they're, about where they are now or even slightly better, and they're not going to be able to trade for a starting pitcher. So they're going to have to rely on Verlander, Scherzer, Senga, the guys that they have for the rotation. I do think the pen is where they're going to need to really improve. Obviously, they got Trevor Gott. He looked good for his first couple outings, and he's really struggled since.
Yeah, we will see what the Mets will do. If they are buyers at the market, they will look to improve that bullpen. We'll see what they have to do. Check out Jon Heyman's column on the Mets and what they could do at the trade deadline as they still are trying to make a push towards a playoff.